Hi everyone, I'm Dude Food and welcome to the first episode of SHOWberMetrics, where we will be taking a look at interesting statistics in the MLB, which we can translate into MLB The Show and help you improve your gameplay. For some episodes, we will look into a general statistic and why it's important, but for an episode like today's, we will get into a particular stat for a team or a player and show why it sets them apart from others or how it helps them compensate for a flaw. So for today, with the first episode, we're going to look at the Texas Rangers and why they were a top offense in the first half of the season, and why it's still a respectable offense to this point in the season. The reason why I picked the Rangers is because out of all the top offenses, they were the team with the lowest on-base percentage and on-plus slugging, which are both closely related to the number of runs that a team generally scores. When looking at their basic stats, you'll see that they've been among the league leaders in stolen bases all year long and currently in first place. At the end of the first half, they were in second place. This won't affect their on-base percentage at all, but it essentially artificially improves your slugging and OPS numbers by turning a walk or a single into a double. In fact, if you add their stolen base minus their caught stealing numbers to their total bases, it changes their slugging percentage to 460 and OPS to 788, which in turn puts them from a top 10 and top 11 in both categories to a top 7. Now the 3 or 4 point jump doesn't seem like much, but with average pitching this can be enough to turn a 500 team into a playoff contending offense. But this only matters if they can capitalize. Their 269 average with runners in scoring position wasn't that impressive, especially next to other teams in their league, but remember that this was 15 points better than their general average. And at this point in the season, those splits are still about the same. That's not to say they don't swing for the fences in these situations, because their ISO also goes slightly up, but they're just more locked in. They're just better hitters when runners are in scoring position compared to when nobody is on base. One of the crazier stats here is also that the Rangers lead the league in strikeouts in general, but also number 2 with runners in scoring position. So they strike out a ton no matter what the situation is, and yet still up there in terms of offense. We've seen this in the new age of baseball that strikeouts don't matter too much, but this really gives you an indication of exactly the fact that a good offense can strike out with the best of them. So the conclusion can be drawn that the Rangers are an all or nothing type of team, but with their personnel it worked for them. We know now that in the second half the wheels fell off, but this formula made a potential rebuilding club look like they could be in the pennant race or wildcard race for a very long time. And again, looking at their very basic stats, their stolen bases are the one thing that really jumps out to you. So now that we've looked at what the Rangers do to be successful offensively, let's take a look at our own stats in MLB The Show and see where we can improve. At the end of the day, the goal for the offense is to score as many runs as possible, but to take a step back first, remember that pure power isn't usually a great approach against the best of the best. Successful playoff teams in real life usually have very good contact rate and can sustain rallies. So before we make any squad changes, I want you to go look at your on-base percentage, slugging percentage, on-base plus slugging, and most importantly, batting average with runners in scoring position. Now before we get into the rest, generally if you can sustain an OPS over 800, you're gonna eventually make it to World Series. However, an OPS below 800 doesn't mean that you can't make it. Of course you need to have lights out pitching, but how do you scrape across those important runs in close games? Number 1 is you steal bases. Getting caught stealing from first is not a big deal if you don't hit a ton of home runs, because that first guy that gets on base probably won't score without at least 2 more hits, and if you don't have the confidence that you can string those hits together, he's going to be left on first base at the end of the inning. So even if you steal 50 bases and get caught stealing 50 times, you've just created yourself 50 extra scoring chances that you didn't have before, and all you need is 1 more hit in the inning instead of 2. And for you guys who feel like you put together 6 or 8 hits in a game and that's about it, cutting the number of hits in half that you need to score a run is huge. And if you get caught stealing those 50 out of 100 times, it doesn't really matter because he would have been left on first base otherwise. We're talking specifically for people that feel like they can't string together hits. It's not geared towards people who hit 300 or slug 500, because you can most likely string enough together or smash homers to the point where anything short of like a 65% stealing percentage is going to hurt your offense. And a lot of times you'll see people with 75 to 80% stealing percentage when they're really good at stealing bases. Now one of the great things about stealing bases is that it doesn't have as high of a skill cap as hitting on Hall of Fame does. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is possible for everyone to be successful at it, no matter how good your reaction time or coordination is. I will try to link a couple of nice tutorials in the description, since I myself am a pretty poor base stealer, and I need to improve on it as well. My recommendation is that if you're having trouble scoring, get as much online base stealing experience as you can. Whether it comes naturally to you or not, just keep trying to improve. Of course, start offline, but it's not the same as playing online and trying to steal bases. Maybe it doesn't work out too well at the beginning, but hopefully the learning curve is very quick and you can get to a decent percentage very soon. This will get us into the second stat to look at, which is average with runners in scoring position. We want to look at the stat not only on its own, but also how it compares to your regular average. If your average with runners in scoring position is higher than your regular average, this is even more of an indication that you just need to get guys to second base more often. Some people do well once they get there, but getting them there is the hard part. So think about it this way. If you can steal 4 bases in a game and just hit 250 with runners in scoring position, you're adding 1 run per game. Because generally with a guy on second base 4 times in the game, you're going to knock him in at least once. 4 stolen bases per game seems ridiculous for real life, but for a fantasy mode with as much speed as you want, it's not out of the question. But before we get to the next point, let me go back and say if your average with runners in scoring position is lagging behind your regular average, don't worry about putting on pressure with stolen bases just yet. Take the time to recognize when pitchers are trying to make you get yourself out, and don't chase pitches in clutch situations. Pitchers often throw much differently with runners in scoring position, and I have some tips on that in previous videos as well if that's a problem for you, so I will link those. But now that we know what to focus on, it's time to lean into an approach with the squad building. You may have guys in your lineup like Evan Longoria, Frank Thomas, Robinson Cano, Al Kaline who have really good offensive numbers and nice swings, but maybe don't produce big power numbers for you. If you have someone putting up average or below average numbers compared to the rest of the guys in your lineup and they don't have speed, just replace them with someone who does have speed. You can pretty much assume that you're going to make up that kind of production, and with the extra speed, you'll be able to get those stolen bases. But you may have an outlier like Frank Thomas, who maybe hits 50 points higher than anyone else on your team, in which case you probably want to keep that guy in your lineup to keep driving in runs. But anyone who you think can have their production replicated and also added speed to that part in the lineup should be replaced. Even if it's a decent speed guy like, let's say Duke Snider, who has around 70 something speed, you might want to consider replacing him with someone like Ty Cobb. At that point, it's just a matter of executing. Remember, you're not trying to cheese by taking advantage of bad animations on the base paths, but in my opinion, catcher throwing is in a relatively balanced place right now, and stealing bases is a completely legitimate tactic. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at some guys in World Series, go to the back around the 900 level, and find a few guys who have under 450 slugging, under 300 average. Take a look at how many stolen bases they have. I'm sure they'll have very good pitching, but they're going to be winning close games even without the best of stats, just because they can get on second base and drive those guys in. Okay, so you may have just watched this whole video and now you're saying, yeah, obviously stealing bases has been around forever. This isn't new information. And for the most part, yeah, that's true. A lot of people steal bases in the MLB. A lot of people steal a ton of bases in MLB The Show. But what I really wanted to key in on is, first of all, the point about stranding too many runners on first base is worse than having a bunch of caught stealings, because you will end up creating many more runners in scoring position opportunities by stealing successfully, even if you have a bad percentage. And also remember that stealing is much less physically demanding than squaring up pitches with the PCI, so over time most people should be able to find a decent amount of success with the right players in their squads and after getting enough experience. If the Rangers could use this formula to take a team with a lot of question marks and make themselves into a formidable first half offense, you can do it in the show too. Good luck, and I hope it helps. If it does, make sure to like the video and subscribe so I know to make more videos just like this one. To see more content from me, check out my Twitch streams at 4 p.m. Central Time on weekdays, and I will catch you guys later.